Welcome to another episode of the Financial Armor Show. My name is Brad Cooper, the president of Cooper Financial Investments, and I want to welcome my co-host today, Tony Shore. How you doing, Tony?
Oh, Brad, great. I'm glad to be here, of course. I just got back from a Disney World vacation.
Yes. How was
Yeah.
that?
My mother-in-law, who's 87,
Wow.
decided rather than give all her money to a memory care unit, in a few years, she still can take all of her kids and her adult grandchildren to Disney World. There were 19 of us, all the
Wow.
adult grandkids, all their significant others, my wife and her two siblings and their families. So we had a blast creating memories, taking your advice, Brad, and using that money to create memories and just leave that with loved ones. And we had so much fun. We had a blast.
Wow.
Yeah.
I am so happy for you. That just
Yeah.
gives me chills just thinking about, what you and your family did, creating memories
Yeah.
and something that will last for the rest of your life and the rest of your kids and her grandkids, which is
Yeah.
just priceless. So Disney World, it's been a while since I've been down there, but while you were having fun this past week in Disney
Yeah.
World,
Yeah.
uh, as I was working, I just had another recording over at Channel 13 KOLD in Tucson, and talked a lot about what we're going to talk about on today's show. And you mentioned your grandmother. We've talked about this topic many, many times as far as the cost of care, whether it's an assisted living facility, whether it's a long-term care facility, or if you have the privilege and ability to stay home, having a nurse come in, and
Right.
that's pretty pricey. I know we've had many discussions. You have personally been impacted with your parents, myself as well.
Yeah.
This coming week will be a year that my dad passed away, but before
Oh,
that, he was in a nursing home for almost 5 years.
wow.
And I tell you what, just it's a learning experience. I learned even more when my grandmother was in a nursing home about 15 years ago, and the high cost, and two, the choices that you have to make as a loved one, as a caretaker,
Yeah.
and the investment, the price. And we're going to talk about that today, which is a very serious topic, which we really discuss, whether it's a seminar we're doing, an educational workshop, or a one-on-one meeting. We're addressing these tough issues that will happen in most retirees' lives.
Right. Exactly. And so it's really important. And I don't, I know we joke, we prep for the show with coffee and donuts, but you're right. Long term care is tremendously expensive, and that's why I made the point about my mother in law. She's in a assisted living. She's actually on the independent living side still, but we'll probably have to
Yeah,
move into assisted living and eventually
right.
memory care. The memory care unit there, it's a very nice place, but it's $12,000 a month.
Wow.
A month.
Per month,
So
that's $144,000 a year, just to put that in
yeah,
perspective.
yeah. So she's like, well, I have X amount. I'd like to leave some of that to my kids, but how do I do it? Because I need it for care. But she's like, well, I'm going to spend some of it now on my grandchildren for this trip to Disney. So that's one way. You want to leave family harmony, but you have to be prepared. You're right. Long-term care is so expensive, and I think it's important to have a strategy that can help you prepare for it, and that's what you do to help your clients, right?
Absolutely, Tony, and, if you ever hear us talk about, elder care planning, I hate the term, elder care planning, but what is elder care planning? That is preparing before, maybe 3, 5 years or before you are facing that,
Yeah.
decision. What can you do to protect your estate? And
Right.
just like with your mother-in-law, $12,000 a month, it doesn't matter how small or how large of a nest egg you have.
Right.
I mean, in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, that could deplete millions of a
Yeah.
portfolio just like that.
Yeah.
And we're finding, Tony, so many people are self-insured, or the advice, which drives me crazy. I hear this at least once a week. Well, I was just talking to my previous financial planner as we're getting ready to move everything over to you, Brad, and he said, you don't need to worry about long-term care, nursing home. You have enough money to self-pay. And that may be the case, but just since we're on this topic, because unfortunately I have quite a bit of personal experience like you do, Tony, with this,
Yeah.
is yes, you can self-pay. And what happens is Medicaid, or in other states is called different programs, but Medicaid will not kick in and pay. And we're going to talk more about this here in a little bit, pay anything until you deplete your nest egg.
Yeah. Yeah, most states, you have to be down to about $2,000 in your bank
Yes,
account, and they may leave you with a house and a car, especially if you have a spouse, but that's
right.
it. That's it. Then Medicaid or the state sponsored will kick in and help pay for long-term care. However, Medicare does not pay for long-term care or even contribute to it. There's a very special situation, Brad, you've told me about this, that because my mom is in long-term care and my dad is probably going to need it. And so, believe me, I know, Brad, and you and I have been through it. You've been through it more with your clients, but we've personally been through it with family members. And I just know that until you have spent down all your money, then Medicaid in the state will kick in and cover it, but only in certain facilities, like the facility where
True.
my mother-in-law is at, which is really nice. If she runs out of money there, they would move her to a state-run facility, a nursing
Right.
home, and she wouldn't be able to stay in their memory care unit that's really nice and well-funded, and, when she runs out of money, then she has to go to a not so nice facility probably, right?
That's true. And I have a client that retired from the state of Arizona. She was a supervisor over the entire Arizona long-term care system, all tax they
Wow.
call it here in Arizona, and just many visits with her. Just she was looking forward to retirement so bad because of how messed up the system is. All tax in Arizona, Medicaid in other states, and basically another responsibility that she had, Tony, was she had to go to all the long-term care facilities in Arizona at least once a year and do an audit, a visit. And I'll never forget, here it's been a few years ago, I was talking to her and I said, you know what, I'm thinking about moving my parents out and my dad is facing, long-term care. What recommendations of some really good facilities, or what's the best?
Yeah.
And I'll never forget, she said, Brad, there's no such thing as best. There's okay and there's not good. And why
Yeah.
she said that was, and a lot of it,
It's true.
this was before the pandemic, but since the pandemic and after, what we have been through, the quality of care in the majority of facilities is really a challenge for these long-term care facilities because they can't find good quality people to come in and do the work that most of us don't want to do. And then on top of that, the pay. So my heart really goes out to, if you're facing this decision and trying to choose a long-term care facility, and you're right, Tony, you may be limited if you don't have other resources or other avenues, which we're going to talk about, to
Right.
maybe pay. And then you're limited on going to a facility maybe you don't want to.
Right. Yeah, and that's huge. I mean, we were fortunate in Minnesota where my parents are at.
Right.
One of the top facilities that is
Wow.
associated with the state happens to be near their small hometown, and it is such good care. The people that run it are great. We know them. It's amazing. And it is one of the best. But my wife actually works in that industry as well, and she says the same thing. It's just like most
No,
of these places are not great,
no.
and so you really have to be discerning. But the key to avoiding these problems is having a plan, and that's what we're talking about today, right?
That's right,
Flexible.
Tony.
You want to have flexible protection. There are a lot of different strategies.
Yes, and having options. And what I'm finding out as we're, doing speaking engagements and talking to people, people just don't know what they don't know. And our industry, Tony, is doing a very poor job of what I'm seeing as far as giving people solutions and options and education about this topic. I just read a study from a survey by Genworth. Genworth
Yeah,
is one of the largest long-term care insurance providers. And what we're seeing today is a lot of our clients who bought these long-term care policies, whether it's from Genworth or other companies, maybe 30 years ago, they were much younger, they were healthier, they weren't as expensive. Now, fast forward, I bet at least once or twice a week, I'm getting phone calls from my clients saying, Brad, I just got a notice saying they're going to increase my premiums. And if I don't pay that, I could either lose my policy or be reduced, to lower benefits. And the reason for that, Tony, is as the baby boomers are entering retirement and going through retirement and going into nursing homes, it's, getting very pricey and costly for the insurance companies, and they can't keep up with the high cost.
sure. Yeah, that's what's happening. So they're either aren't offering the same types of insurance policies, or they're raising the premiums so much. But there are alternatives, and
There is.
that's why we want to have flexible protection, right?
That's right. In this study, they said the average private room, and this is nationwide, is on average over $9,000 per month. And of course, your mother-in-law, 12,000. I have some clients that have had parents in Scottsdale area for $15,000 a month. So that's the average, which is a lot of money. Like you mentioned earlier, Tony, Medicare doesn't cover long-term care expenses
Yeah.
like a lot of us think.
Yeah, they only cover about 90 days, and that's only in 90 to 100 days, only in certain circumstances, only if you're transferred
Right.
directly from a hospital. There are a lot of, caveats to even that little bit of coverage they give.
That's right.
Yeah.
And, but there's, we talked about flexible protection for a healthy retirement. Really, it comes down to three key things. Number one, first and most part, is protecting your family.
Yeah.
And not only financially, but emotionally. And it's really difficult for caretakers or spouses, especially as what I'm seeing daily is our clients and us personally are aging every day.
Yeah.
When you get up to maybe 70s and 80s, and then you have an 85-year-old, spouse that's trying to help her husband choose a nursing home and she's not in good health, it's very challenging. So, but
Yeah.
also the second key thing, protecting your choices of what you want to do. I know most people today, and there's been studies, Tony, that state that, and I agree with this. When you get to that point, I want to be able to stay in my home as long as I can. I
Yes.
don't want to have to be forced to go into assisted, skilled, or memory unit until the very last minute. And there's options for that and choices as long as you have the maybe right strategies to support that and you're aware of those. And thirdly, not running out of money. And that's the key right there, especially with most Americans today. If they're paying $9,000, $12,000 a month, how long will it take for them maybe to run out of money? And then I want to add to that because you're right. Once you run out of money, then Medicaid will kick in. But if you have a surviving spouse at home, of course, they can't take the home. They can't take the car of the surviving or spouse living at home,
Right.
correct?
Right.
However, what you want to be aware of is let's say your spouse has to go into a nursing home also. Then
Yeah.
all the rules have changed. Not only are you paying 12,000, now you may be facing $24,000 a month. Then once you run out of money, Medicaid will then kick in, but they'll put a lien on your house. They can take all your assets thereafter.
Yes.
And I've seen that so many times. So it's so
Yeah.
important to have this conversation and know what your options are as far as long-term care and flexibility in your
Right.
retirement.
Right. And what's the third thing, as far as the things you don't wanna do? You said second is protecting your choices, and third would be, what's
Well,
that?
sec well, third is not running out of money,
Oh, yeah,
you know?
okay. Yeah,
And that's pretty important. So,
yeah,
if you can make your money stretch, for the rest of your life and never run out of money,
yeah.
that's one area that we really pay very close attention to. But also, there's 4 things you should bring up during your family discussion before facing this difficult decision. Number 1, living options. Like I talked about, most people today want to stay at home. Is that an option? Do you have the means, the financial ability to bring in a nurse,
Mhm.
full time or part time? Then I just had a meeting the other day, and there was 6 children in the family. And when mom went into a nursing home, or before she went into a nursing home, they decided to keep her at home, and they had a shifts of each of the 6 kids. One had one each week to stay with mom. Then the
Oh,
next one. So every 6 weeks, you know, they had one of the kids stay with the mom, which worked out great until she had to go into a nursing home.
yeah.
But
Well,
oh,
yeah,
go
I
ahead.
think yeah, and you don't wanna be a burden to your kids either. I'm sure a lot of parents, worry about, burdening their kids in their later years, and, I'm not implying that I don't think, my kids would wanna help me. I know they would, but I want them to be able to enjoy their lives without constantly worrying about me too. So, having a plan for yourself ahead of time and having the proper insurance, the proper plan, it all ties into your financial and retirement plan, doesn't it?
It does, Tony. And you mentioned a very important topic, which is in this study and other studies too, that the burden, the financial burden, the emotional burden
Yes.
of being forced to go live with your children, which a lot of children will welcome that. I
Yes.
as well with my mom, but it's a strain, and it's difficult, especially if your children are still working
Yeah.
and have jobs. It can be very emotionally and very financially challenging. Another thing that as a family discussion you want to bring up and make sure you have all your ducks in a row is making sure your healthcare directive outlining your wishes in case you become incapacitated. So, what are your wishes? What's your parents' wishes if you're facing this decision with them on what they want as they face that? So, it's very important. And we talked about this in the past of having a good, updated estate plan. And if you need that or don't have that, reach out to us, and making sure everything is updated from your healthcare directive to your power of attorneys as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's huge. So, Brad, this is such an important topic, and if I'm hearing you correctly, one of the biggest takeaways so far from our show should be that few things in life are more important than making a financial plan and a retirement plan to deal
So
with this,
true.
right? And this is something people put off, though, isn't it?
Yeah. They they procrastinate.
Yeah.
Every time I have a talk with my attorney friend who helps, all of our clients, he said, "Brad, I bet out of every 10 people I talk about this topic, I bet 9 out of 10 procrastinate, and I get a phone call the day of when their parents, mom, dad, or loved one has to go into a nursing home, or a spouse, and then they say, 'What can we do? What options?'"
Yeah.
Then you're limited.
Yeah, then you're very limited. Yeah, that's the problem. You got to plan ahead. And procrastination reminds me that I know you and I have been planning on doing an entire show on procrastination, but you keep putting it off.
That's so true. But, we've been talking about, a lot of people would say, "Brad, this is negative. This is just gloom and doom," but
Yeah,
it's a reality, folks. But
yeah,
let's go through the next few minutes of the show talking about a little bit better news. What solutions are there out there? And as we were talking the other night at a speaking engagement, uh, I said, there's probably 50 people in the room. I said, just by a show of hands, we went through a lot of these different strategies, which
Sure.
we're going to discuss. By a show of hands, how many are familiar with what we just talked about and that these strategies have been out there and available for you? Not one person, Tony, in the room raised their hands. And I can tell you why. And this is what I shared with them. Here's the reason why. I've been in this industry for 30 years. And most of my industry, not all, but the majority, they do investments and they stop there. They
Yeah.
don't talk about other risk like long-term care we're talking about today, or future taxation or estate planning. It's just investments, and they don't talk about the other strategies. And I'll tell you why. Number one, I believe, and I have seen in my industry, they're not as profitable to the advisors. So they don't want to go there.
They
It
don't
takes
focus on
time.
those things because they don't make as much money off
That's
of them.
right.
Yeah, that's the
And
problem.
and it takes time. It takes a caring advisor. We're all about at Cooper Financial relationships. Relationships, 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 not transactions. And you really understand this when you're faced with this decision, when you're calling a 1-800 number to a large national investment firm saying, "Can you help me with this?" And being on hold for an hour, you're not going to get the help. So I would recommend work with a local advisory firm, someone that specializes or has the strategic partners like we do that specializes in all of these areas. So, so what's some solutions, Tony, that we've talked about briefly in other shows, but being proactive, what you want to do is if you think this could be a concern within the next 5 years or so, we like to plan 3 to 5 years in advance. Here's the reason why. Most of these programs like Medicaid, Alltex, if you apply for state aid, federal aid, there's normally a 5-year look back period. So we have a couple strategies. Two, I'll mention just briefly. They're all under the insurance umbrella. It's not long-term care policies. So what we're doing with some of these strategies is one particular is guaranteed approval. You put money in, and there's a 4-year vesting period. But after that, there's tax-free long-term care, in-home care benefits that's paid out. And there's 3 levels of approval with this strategy. One, meaning that if you're in poor health, under the age of 80, you're guaranteed approval. So in the next 3, 4, 5 years, if you face in-home health care, long-term care, it will pay out quite a bit per month for 5 years.
Wow.
And how that is based on is when you're getting ready to make a claim with that, you call our office. We'll get a form to you that you get signed by your doctor that states that you cannot perform 2 out of the 6 activities of daily living, which we talked about. Examples of those is bathing, transferring, eating, toilet, getting dressed. If you cannot perform 2 of the 6, then the insurance company will start paying benefits to you personally. Then you would pay the facility or maybe pay a nurse to come into your home.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's huge. So that's great. And obviously, communication is part of this. You want to be working with a trusted financial advisor like yourself who cares, not the cookie cutter, big
right.
box financial services or somebody who's just interested in selling you just your cookie cutter insurance policy and doing investments, and that's it. You got to talk about estate planning and long-term care planning. I think this is so important.
It is. And if your financial advisor is not talking or performing what we call holistic financial planning, is not a true fiduciary, get a second opinion.
Yeah.
Go out and learn and be educated because you'll find out very quickly there's so much information out there that you will probably learn to help make sure you're protected in all these areas.
Yeah. Yeah, and you mentioned things like, you wanna make sure you have, healthcare directives and powers of attorney and medical powers of attorney. You wanna get these things set up, and I know you work alongside estate planning attorneys to help your clients with this, right?
Absolutely. If you and I had this question the other day, if you have a estate plan, that was done a few years ago, especially before 2020, I would encourage you to contact us. Our estate planning team will look at your trust at no cost and make sure everything is updated. Because of the Secure Act that went into effect January 1st of 2020, there's a good chance that your power of attorneys are not HIPAA compliant, depending
Ah,
on when you created those, what state. We have a lot, which most people in Arizona, they're living here, are not from Arizona originally. So they're
right, right. A lot
coming
of
in here to retire. So, Brad, I just got my trust done in Minnesota or Washington or Missouri. Is it good here in Arizona? In most cases, most of it is, but our attorney team will look at that at no cost for you and just give you peace of mind knowing that your power of attorney is your healthcare directive and making sure your distribution plan is exactly the way you want it.
Yeah, yeah, and these things can vary from state to state. That is
Yes.
true, and that's important to note. Well, we're almost out of time for today's show, Brad, and the big solution here and the positive note is there are strategies out there, and you mentioned how you help your clients and can help our listeners with this. But let's let our listeners know how they can get a hold of you, Brad, and set up that consultation.
Absolutely, Tony. Just to, if you just want to set up a consultation at no cost, just to visit on this topic or any other topic over a cup of coffee, you can call our office directly Monday through Friday, and we will answer the phone 520-543-8345. Again, that's 520-543-8345. Or you can visit our website, which is financialarmorshow.com. Again, that's financialarmorshow.com, and request a consultation through our website just to have this very important discussion and just to learn what your options are. And after that visit, one of two things will happen. Number one, we'll decide to get back together a second visit, or secondly, we'll shake hands, part ways, and you'll know more than what you did when you came into the office.
All right. Thanks, Brad. And listeners, thanks for tuning in. That does it for today's episode of the Financial Armor Show with our host, Brad Cooper from Cooper Financial.